Speaker, Reverend Kristy Garvin. Kristy Garvin was raised by two loving parents in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. She retired from education in 2012 after a 37-year career as a teacher, coach, and consultant. She is a 2014 graduate of the School of Healing and Prophecy and was ordained by Fellowships of the Spirit in 2014. She is a member of the Church of the Living Spirit, Fellowships of the Spirit, and the Lilydale Assembly. Kristy lives in Erie, where she volunteers and serves on the board of directors of Community Shelter Services, an agency providing a pathway to housing, help, and hope for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. She spends her summers in Lilydale serving in the Healing Temple. She also serves her churches and her community as a healer, mentor, chairperson, speaker, and volunteer. It's quite a pedigree, huh? Kristy likes to combine her love of travel with spiritual experiences and learning. She recently fulfilled, that was crossed out. The rest of it's crossed out.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So, without further ado, I give you Reverend Kristy Garvin.
Good evening. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. Yeah, we won't talk about the time that it took me to get here. I had 5:30 in my head instead of 6 o'clock. So I had 6 o'clock in my head instead of 5:30. That's how it went. So we're in the car. It's like 5 to 6, 10 to 6, and I said, oh, I was supposed to be there at 5:30. I started speaking at 6. So I'm a little discombobulated, but that's okay. A couple disclaimers before I start. I always have to do this. One, I'm a squiggle, and if you don't know what that is, I'm all over the place. I'll get where I need to go, but it won't be a straight line. I can pretty much guarantee that. I certainly am not a biblical scholar in any sense of the word. In fact, I'm pretty surface level. I believe what people tell me, basically, which is a good thing sometimes, and sometimes it's not. But I don't have that depth of, I don't want to say knowledge, because I know a lot, but I don't have that depth of thinking that I probably should have. So we just want to get that out of the way and tell you about that. So when I agreed to speak tonight, I did not know what the topic was. So Joanne sent me a text and she said, it's digging. I thought, digging? Are you kidding me? So I responded that I'd have to dig deep for that one. And she wrote back and told me that if I looked in the dictionary, I was sure to unearth something.
Oh, what did you say?
Oh, well, I did. And so I did look in the dictionary, actually, in Webster's dictionary, and found a lot of definitions of digging, some that were appropriate and some were not. But there were two that I thought really came for me. One, to bring to the surface or to unearth. And the second one was to bring to light or out of hiding. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about how I became a spiritualist and how digging deep helped me get here. Because it was more than a surface thing. I started coming to Lilydale in the 80s. I taught school, so we had the summers off. So my friend said, come on, we're going to Lilydale. Okay, what's Lilydale? Well, you'll see. So we got here and had our fortunes told, because that's why we came for a number of years. We came and had our fortunes told. We did the activities, we went to the stump, we went to the Healing Temple, we did all of those things. And I don't think I ever really realized it was a religion. I don't know how I missed that, but I told you, I'm like on the surface. So anyhow, I enrolled in the school here at Fellowships in 2012 and became a church member. It came automatically, and so I was a spiritualist. Okay, so I'm sure I looked at the principles. I'm sure we went over them, but they didn't seek in, or they didn't seep in for sure. So I was a Christian. I was baptized in the Presbyterian Church. I was raised in the EUB Church, and if you don't know, that's Evangelical United Brethren. And then we merged, and then we became United Methodist. So when you were talking, I thought it was interesting because this is just a side note. It was to be United Methodist. It's gone back a lot to just plain Methodist, and we kind of got left out of it. But that's another story for another day. You know, I did all the things I should do. Went to church, went to Sunday school, went to church camp, sang in the choir, was president of the youth fellowship, all of those kind of things. I did everything a good Christian girl is supposed to do. I believed in God, a God who was up there somewhere, totally separate from me, for sure, watching and judging. For me, God was never vengeful. It was very much a loving God, because my own father was very loving, and so if he was a father, he must be like my dad. So I didn't see him as vengeful at all. But I certainly saw us as very separate. Very separate. I was here, he was there. So when I graduated in 2014, my friend Eileen, who many of you know, we decided we'd buy a house. And you had to be a member of the assembly to do that. Eileen had done that years before, and I just had never done it. So I got the application, I got the letters of recommendation, I paid my fee, I'm all set to go. And I was ready for my interview. And when I talked to people about the interview, the one thing that kept coming up over and over again is that they were going to ask me, do you believe in vicarious atonement? I have to be honest, I didn't know what that was. I had to look that up. So did I believe in vicarious atonement? I really had never thought about it. So I was brought up with that belief, so it must be true. It was part of me. And that's where a lot of my digging started. So I actually put my membership on hold for a year. I think it might have been 2 years until I could really answer that question. I knew what the answer was, but I didn't know what it was for me. So, as I said, that process was not linear. It was all over the place. And it continues even today. So it started with, what did I really believe about God? And it reminds me of this story, you've probably all heard it, about the little girl in art class. She was totally engrossed in her picture, and the teacher went back and said, what are you drawing? And she said, I'm drawing a picture of God. And the teacher leaned down and she said, honey, nobody knows what God looks like. And the little girl said, they will when I'm finished. Yeah. So for the first time in my life, I really examined what I believed about God, not just what I was told. So our spiritualist principles, whether they're Church of the Living Spirit, ours here, NSAC, doesn't matter. They all have the belief in God. But nobody tells you what that is. I wish they would have, but no. So that was my digging to find out really what I thought God was. What was God of my own understanding? So I read, I researched, went to classes. Probably the most important thing I did is I sat in quiet meditation. So I wish I could precisely define for you and for me, I guess, what God is. I really don't know. You know, is it an energy? Is it a vibration? I don't know. And it may be something, an undefinable concept that I don't even, it's not within my realm of knowing. But that's the beauty of it. To be a spiritualist, it's the God of my own understanding. And it's probably different from yours. And that's okay. That's what makes us spiritualists. So what do I know today? I know that God, my concept of God, is unconditional love. That's really just kind of the bottom. And bottom line, and I know that nothing can ever separate me from that. There's a oneness, only oneness. There's no separation. And I know that I don't have to earn or be worthy of God's love. I'm loved simply because I am, and that's not going to change. That can't change, not with my God. So all of that brought up some more questions. So I started digging some more. And somewhere I started thinking about Christianity and the Bible and the truth of all of it. For me, a lot of it started with, many of you know, Mary Magdalene. I had read a work of fiction with some truth in it, and I didn't know what was true and what wasn't. So that started my search looking at Mary Magdalene. And that started me back, took me back to the very beginnings of the Bible. So I know that the story of Jesus started as oral traditions because we didn't have written back then. And that much of it took place in secrecy because it wasn't safe to talk about it out loud. And I know that there were a lot of small groups who met in private and that they were very diverse in their beliefs about Jesus and their practices. I didn't realize that it wasn't until 50 to 100 years later that those stories were finally put down on paper and written. You know, I thought the Bible was the Word of God. What was I thinking? You know what I mean? I don't know where that came from. But anyhow, so that started, and as I looked at how the Bible started, I know it was written in 3 different languages, basically, Greek, Coptic, and one that's called Syriac. And because of Rocco Errico and his teachings, I know the translation from the Aramaic and how very different that was. And that really helped start my journey. So later, I discovered the Bible wasn't really put together for a couple of hundred years after Jesus. And it was an interesting process, I'm sure. Because of all these different groups and all from everywhere, I just can't even begin to imagine. It took them hundreds of years to decide on what would go in the New Testament. Because, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, the politics, you know, the intrigue, the negotiations, it must have been tremendous. But anyhow, so finally there were 26 books that were recognized as the New Testament. So as I said, I started digging with Mary Magdalene. Well, she has a gospel. I didn't know that. Where was it and how did you find it? So I did look for her gospel and found it in one of the Gnostic gospels. And they, over the last, let me go back. Sorry, I'm like, So I found her gospel. It's just a short one. You can find it online. You just need to write in the Gospel of Mary. It's not all there. Interestingly, the same passages are missing from all 3 copies, is my understanding. And they were written in 2 different languages. So I know that in her gospel, God is clearly defined as the good. That's how it's he, she, it is referred to. So the emphasis in that gospel is the ascent of the soul is about your personal journey toward goodness in your inner consciousness, your behavior, and your relationships. So it stresses the importance of inner spiritual knowledge and enlightenment. And for me, that was really important. So I started digging some more. If there was a Gospel of Mary, what else was out there? And that's when I discovered a book that's very different called it's not called The New, it's called A New Testament. It purposefully was not called The New Testament. And that was a big part of my digging, is that they looked at all of the manuscripts that have been found in the last 100 years. There's probably 100 of them now, maybe more. They're still finding them. Mark's saying it's higher. Yeah, and they're still finding them. The one you've probably heard of is the one at Nag Hammadi in Egypt in 1945, where they found 52 scrolls in an alabaster jar. Think about that we're that old. So a man named Hal Towsing, I believe, is how it's pronounced, got together a group of scholars, biblical scholars, and a group of spiritual leaders, rabbis, representatives of the Catholic Church, I think the Presbyterian, lots of the churches. So they got together and talked about the Bible, how it was put together, and would any of those Gospels be included in the Bible? Would any of those writings be included in the Bible if it were put together today? So they had very specific criteria. The one I really remember is they had to be able to authenticate it to be in the same time period as the Bible, written in the same time period. And I don't have any idea how they do any of that, but they do. And so they looked at the Bible, and they looked at all these writings, and they added 10 new books to the New Testament. Therefore, again, it's called a New Testament. Mary's happens to be one of them. So that gave me a very different perspective as I looked at those on the teaching of Jesus. And in very simple terms, I guess you could say, they emphasize that the Gnostics in particular emphasize that personal spiritual knowledge is the key to salvation. Personal spiritual knowledge, not what I've been told by the church. And so from them, I looked at their tradition is that Jesus is seen as a divine being who took human form in order to lead humanity back to the divinity within us. That made so much sense to me. That just resonated. So that's how I got, I guess, where I am today, the digging of those criteria. I want to mention again, if you haven't looked at a New Testament, some of it is such beautiful, beautiful language. I'd encourage you to look at it. And certainly the work of Rocco Errico has, and Mark mentioned it, I listened to his sermon from last week today and mentioned some of that. The language, the direct translation from Aramaic is so different in many ways than ours is. So I just kept digging. And I'd encourage you to do it too. Because what I know today may change tomorrow. And that's one of the things that I love about spirituality, is that's okay. I'm free to do that. I'm free to take new knowledge that I get, mix it up with what I already know, and be that person. That's one of the beauties, I think, of spiritualism. So there are I just talked about one or two of our principles. I need to dig into the continuity of life, because that has been another digging, if you will. And personal responsibility is also another big key. But we don't have time to talk about those today. And that's okay. It's an excavation for another day and time. So I'm going to end with a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. Enlightenment, peace, and joy will not be granted by someone else. The well is within us. And if we dig deeper into the present moment, the water will spring forth. So keep digging. And one more thing, Do I believe in vicarious atonement? No. No, I do not, because I'm a spiritualist. Thank you.